So today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where another Korean War breaks out. Now the Koreas have been kind of peaceful as of lately. There's not been any tension going on as well as reported. So why not take a look at a scenario where war breaks out in 2022 and these two countries go to war with the help of their allies. Now, of course, like all my other videos, this video is not supposed to be 100% realistic. It takes aspects of realism and puts it into entertainment, which is what basically all my videos are. So if something crazy happens or something that doesn't really make much sense happens, then you can just consider that an aspect of entertainment. If you like this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. That really shows me that you guys are liking the channel's videos, you're liking the channel, and it tells me what I should do and what I shouldn't do. So subscribe if you're new, and let's go ahead and get started. Now the breakout of this war, honestly, I'm not really too sure how this would break out. Modern day wise, I think some like skirmish could happen on the border, but other than that, I don't really know. But of course, we're going to have North Korea as the aggressor and then South Korea as the defender. And then we have North Korean troops crossing the border into South Korea. Now, of course, this would trigger the US right away because the US has military bases in South Korea. And of course, South Korea is a defensive ally of the United States, which is a defense treaty saying that if South Korea gets attacked, then the US will come to the aid of South Korea. So yeah, the USA is going to get involved pretty much right away. Along with the USA, we also have Canada getting involved, and we have a pretty interesting war that looks like this. Now, taking a glance at this map, you might be wondering what even is happening, but if you focus in on the Korean Peninsula, then we're seeing something similar to the 1950s. And to be honest, this will kind of play out like how it did in real life in the First Korean War, if you will. North Korean forces pushed down, although South Korea is a lot more South Korea is a lot more advanced in technology than North Korea is. They have more modernized weapons, infantry, stuff like that. So, South Korea isn't going to fall to North Korea necessarily. But North Korea does have more manpower in their army, which I guess doesn't really mean anything. But we do have South Korea pushing North Korea back on their own. But ultimately, with the aid and support of China, we have North Korea pushing down South Korea. Eventually, US forces in South Korea start to meet up with the Korean army, and they push back North Korea. We then have US and Canadian troops finally landing in Korea, which pushes back North Korea all the way. From here, we see a campaign made into North Korea. We eventually see the capturing of Pyongyang, and a pretty quick military operation pushing up the Korean Peninsula and cutting North Korea into two. From here, we have both sides being cut back, and in all realism, if this war were to break out in real life, we would see the demise of North Korea. But seeing as this video is mostly for entertainment, we have China doing what they did back in the First Korean War, and joining the war on the side of North Korea. Now, China's main cause for this is they want to push back the West from their borders, and they want to ensure their security and their influence in the East Asian region. So now, with Chinese forces crossing the North Korean border, we have a pushback of Western forces from the Korean Peninsula. Now, North Korea and China have the advantage here. China is literally right there, and then, the US and Canada are across the ocean. So China can send most of its forces down into Korea and down into South Korea, capturing Seoul and pushing down the Korean Peninsula. At this point in the war, we do have some other countries getting involved. So we have Japan getting involved, we have Taiwan getting involved, the Philippines, and Australia. For now, other US allies refrain from joining the war until they are economically capable of not relying on China. And this will be an interesting war economically wise because I'm pretty sure it would crash the world market. The world's two largest manufacturers of products are at war, which means everyone's really going to have to pick a side here who they want to import from because there's no way they're going to import from both. So over in Korea, we see the fall of South Korea, but we do see Western forces getting ready to fight China. So taking a look at Navy, which is something I don't usually do, but looking at Navy is a nice touch because it gives more meaning to the wars and the invasions and the naval landings. But taking a look at that, we can see the naval power of the two sides. So China's Navy is holding down the East, well, I don't know what you would call this. I guess the Korean Sea. I don't know what it's actually called. Or the Yellow Sea, that's what it's called. And then we have the South China Sea, which is mostly in China's hands. The area around Taiwan is in Chinese hands. And then, of course, we have the blue team with the Philippines and Japan under their control. Now, it would be interesting to see how other Chinese allies react to this war. And I know this is involving more from just a Korean conflict. This is more of a screw China conflict, but Russia would most likely not get involved with this because, North Korea pulled the trigger and then China pulled the trigger again. So, Russia, I don't know with Russia anymore, honestly, but I don't think they would want to join considering they're also busy over here. Pakistan, I don't think they would join without proper cause, aka India joining. India might join over the whole, this area thing, but I don't know. I don't know if this will be the one. But anyway, we have the U.S. Pacific Fleet en route to Japan and the Philippines, which will help push back China in the South China Sea. Then, of course, gain more control over the Sea of Japan. And then, of course, we also have a big chunk of the U.S. military being moved over to Japan and the Philippines. Meanwhile, we see a Chinese landing in Taiwan, which wipes out the country. And we also see the Chinese Navy beat back the Japanese Navy. Down south, we see China take more of the South China Sea and push over to the border with the Philippines, or I guess the naval border with the Philippines. But we finally do see the US Pacific Fleet arrive over here in Asia, and we see that fleet absolutely destroy China's fleet. So China's Navy is pushed back from Japan. They are also pushed back out of the South China Sea. A direct naval supply line is connected between the Philippines and Japan, and the US Navy gains control of the areas that is east of Taiwan. Up north, we see the Blue Team Navy and the Chinese Navy skirmish over the Sea of Japan. And overall, we see the West trying to gain naval superiority before actually trying to land in South Korea and take back the country. Now, the U.S. really wants to open up another front here because, the U.S. versus China one-on-one would be an interesting war, to say nonetheless. But having South Korea and North Korea in the war would give the U.S. a chance to actually beat China because, it would be extremely unlikely for the U.S. to make a landing in China. But making a landing in South Korea and pushing up the Korean Peninsula isn't too unlikely, especially since Japan is right there. So with Korea in the war, we could definitely see a U.S. invasion of China take place. And then we also have other U.S. allies like Vietnam or India who could help out the U.S. But in this scenario, like I said, India won't be joining. But Vietnam will be joining this war over economical reasons and because of past relations with China. And unfortunately for Vietnam, this does lead a kind of a chain reaction throughout all of Southeast Asia. So we have Laos and Cambodia joining, and China forces Myanmar to join the war. Now this does look bad for Vietnam here, but we are talking about Vietnam. So we do have the Vietnamese pushing out from their southern area and capturing Cambodia. Not all of Cambodia, but a good chunk of it. From here, we see those farmers push up into Laos, and China starts to freak out as they realize they're having a repeat of the 70s. So Chinese forces then push into northern Vietnam and out from Laos, and honestly, this looks like a second Korean War. So now US forces are pushing over and into Vietnam in order to back the front against China and Laos. Meanwhile, up north, we have the Blue Team Navy continuing to push back the Chinese Navy. Eventually, we do see naval supremacy on the Vietnamese coast. We also see another naval supply chain being linked up between Vietnam and the Philippines, which gains full access of the South China Sea area. Now, the US still wants another front to open up against China, and they're really trying to convince Thailand to join this war, but unfortunately for the Blue Team, Thailand has stated that it will stay neutral and will not be joining this war. So for now, the US will just have to, fight navally and then fight in Vietnam. Up in the Sea of Japan, we have the US Navy kicking back the Chinese Navy as they gain naval superiority over the region. But China does still hold out on the Korean Peninsula, which is a big kind of problem for the US. Down south, though, they do manage to get more sea area around Taiwan, which does lead to a naval landing in Taiwan, liberating the country. Next up, we have US naval forces stationed in the South China Sea starting to move up north in order to counter China. So we do see these big holes throughout the US Navy area, but this does just mean they're moving their ships closer to China, therefore they'll be able to push back China even further. So we see that in South China as the US gains naval supremacy over the entire area, and we also see that up in the Sea of Japan, where the US Navy gains superiority over the eastern Korean shore area. Next up, we see the Strait of Taiwan pretty much liberated, and it is here that the US Navy is confident that they can make a landing in Korea and push back the Chinese and the North Koreans. Down south in Vietnam, though, we do see Laos kick Vietnam and the US out of their country, as well as China pushing further into Vietnam. Like I said, though, the US and allies will be making a landing in South Korea, leading to a front being opened up in Southeast Korea. From here, this front moves across and connects all southern areas. We see multiple naval landings being made on the east coast of Korea. Overall, these fronts are connected and a push throughout the South Korean country is made. The US Navy pushes up the west coast of Korea, leading to more naval landings being made, and overall, North Korean forces start to get trapped down here in South Korea, leading to the wipeout of the forces and the full liberation of South Korea. From here, we have South Korea crossing the border and going into North Korea. North Korea folds pretty quickly as they're already worn out from this war. Eventually, we have the collapse of North Korea. With this, it is now just solely China and Southeast Asia versus NATO and allies. Now, just to top off this big smack in the face for China, we have the UK and France joining the side of the US and South Korea. New Zealand finally joins the war, and it looks like the West will be coming out on top in this war, although there is one factor that could change pretty much everything. Now, Russia is concerned about this because the West invading China and putting a new democracy on their doorstep would not be ideal for them. So a meeting between Russia and the West takes place. Now, that seems unlikely with the whole Ukraine thing, but it does take place. And basically, the West just assures Russia that there won't be any alliances with the new Chinese government they plan to put into power. So basically, they're just going to reset the Chinese government, make it democratic, and basically just leave. So with that, there's a treaty signed saying that the West won't put China in an alliance, and Russia is assured of its security. Anyway, back down south, we finally have Western troops crossing over into the border of China, and we have the US Navy completely kicking back the Chinese Navy. Eventually, ports are bombed and the Chinese Navy is completely eradicated. Down south, Chinese forces are kicked back from Vietnam, Laos is completely captured, Burma sinks into the ocean, and a new front is started in southern China. We see multiple naval landings being made across the Chinese coast, which are pretty close to major Chinese cities. And now it really isn't looking too hot for China. Now, China does have nuclear bombs, and I wouldn't be too surprised if they use them. So, China and Russia, when they get scared and back to a corner, they're nuclear bombs, basically. So now the sweep through China begins. Although it is a very bloody sweep, we do overall have a pretty big sweep. I just said sweep like 5 times. China eventually loses access to the sea, which would most likely hurt the world's economy because China can't export. Although I think the West would probably just take control of that export, which is good for them. And overall, China just starts to fold. We have the capturing of Beijing. And after advancing only a little bit more and taking over all of China's populated areas, we have well, I don't know if they would surrender, but China surrenders. And with that, the Second Korean War has come to an end. So taking a look at this peace treaty here, obviously, most notably, we have the unification of the Korean Peninsula, and then we look at the consequences for China. First off, we have this weird kind of Tibet being released. The main bit of Tibet is like right here, but I decided just to give them this northern province, just because it would look nicer with Xinjiang. And speaking of that province, it's been released. And then, of course, we have the new government in China. Vietnam is given Laos and Cambodia, and Taiwan gets a little bit of land from China. Now, the reason I didn't give all of China to Taiwan is because I don't think the government would be able to handle that much land all at once. China is the 4th largest country in the world, and then we're talking about Taiwan, a small island. Well, it's not that really that small, but we're talking about an island getting the 4th largest country in the world. I don't really know if they'd be able to control that all that well. So maybe over time we could see like a progression of treaties, which Taiwan would just keep expanding out into the new Chinese government. But I think that would happen pretty slowly. So actually, I think that is probably possible. We just see a peace treaty as like Taiwan will receive X amount of land every 3 years. So then they can get Manchuria, and then obviously Mongolia, and then all of that, and it just keeps progression and stuff like that. So yeah, that has been what if another Korean War broke out, or I don't know what I'm going to title this video yet. But yeah, that's what would happen theoretically, hypothetically, however you want to word it. This is just a war scenario, so don't get too crazy in the comments. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Like I said, subscribing to the channel and liking the video is pretty important because it lets me know what videos you guys like and what videos I should keep making more of. So like the Empire videos, for example. Well, as of recently, they haven't been getting a lot of attention, so I just kind of moved away from that because that lets me know that you guys don't really like those kind of videos. And then more of like the World War III stuff, that gets a lot more attention, which lets me know that you guys are more interested in that kind of stuff. So yeah, liking, subscribing, important thing, lets me know what to post. Anyway, thank you guys for watching this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.